From WisPolitics in Madison, you're listening to Capital Chats.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another WisPolitics Capital Chats podcast brought to you by Spectrum. I'm Abigail Evans here in the office with my colleague Kate Morton to talk about an interview she did with Legislative Fiscal Bureau Director Bob Lang. Kate, tell us more about the interview.
Yeah, so Abigail, we talked a little bit about the state budget process. We're in the thick of that right now as Republicans and Democrats are kind of trying to work together to build the budget. So Bob talked a little bit about that process and his longtime role leading the LFB.
Great, let's get to the interview.
All right, Bob, thank you for coming on to the podcast today. It's nice to have you.
Welcome. Glad to be here.
Great. Yeah, so I think to get us started off, could you tell me a little bit more about your background and how you ended up leading the Fiscal Bureau?
Well, my background is hometown is Menasha, Wisconsin, up in the Fox Valley area. Graduated from Menasha High School, went to Beloit College, and upon college graduation, I taught school for 3 years, social studies to high school seniors in Muskego, Wisconsin, which is in Waukesha-Racine County area. And in 1968, I was drafted into the Army. It was the peak of the Vietnam War. And spent 2 years in the Army, 1 year in Vietnam, and came back. And when I left the Army, I decided to get a master's degree at UW-Madison, which I did. Went with the GI Bill, and a good friend of mine, Gary Einerson, was the principal of DeForest High School, and I substitute taught a couple of days a week there. And between that and the GI Bill, I was able to get a master's degree. And then I met someone socially who worked at the Fiscal Bureau, and they thought it would be a good fit for me, and I thought it would be a good experience. And so that was a long time ago. In 1971, I started with the Bureau, and I've been there ever since. Became the director in 1977.
Yeah, so could you talk a little bit more about what the LFB's role is in the whole budget process and your role in that?
Well, what we do, we have a staff of 30, and we're a nonpartisan agency of the Wisconsin legislature. So we work for both houses, both parties. We're strictly nonpartisan. And we provide fiscal and policy analysis to any of the state's 132 legislators. Among other things that we do is we staff one committee called the Joint Committee on Finance. It's a 16-member committee. It's been in existence since 1911. All bills that affect revenues or expenditures must be referred to the committee at some point. And their primary responsibility, and thus ours, is to work on the state's biennial budget. We're a biennial budget state. We budget for a 2-year period. Our budget starts on July 1 of the odd-numbered year, ends on June 30 of the next odd-numbered year. We're also a state where the governor has a statutory responsibility to present budget recommendations to the legislature. That happened on February 18th this year for the 25-27 budget period. The bill was introduced by and referred to the committee. And so we do whatever we can to assist those 16 members and others in the legislature as they deliberate on the state's budget. Our initial responsibility is that we provide a summary of all of the provisions that are in the governor's budget. It's a voluminous document. This year, the budget bill itself was 1,917 pages, so it's a huge legal document. We produced a summary of it, which is almost 800 pages, and the legislature used that as sort of the base document when they deliberate on the budget. The finance committee that we staff is now in the process of holding public hearings around the state on the budget. Last week we were in Kaukauna and in West Dallas at State Fair Park, Kaukauna High School. And then on the 28th, the committee will have a public hearing at the high school in Hayward, Wisconsin, the 29th Wausau, and allow anyone who wants to testify on the governor's budget to do so. And then following the public hearings, the committee will start an executive session where they begin to vote agency by agency, item by item on the governor's budget and make changes to it and craft what they want their version of the budget to look like before it goes to the floor of the Senate and Assembly, which likely is sometime end of June. Goal of trying to pass a budget if possible by July 1st, the beginning of the new fiscal year.
Yeah. Now, as you mentioned, this is a really long document that's, pretty complex. There's a lot of different funding sources in there. What are some of the basics of the budget that people should know as they're kind of parsing through it?
The governor's budget recommendation for the 2-year period is about $122 billion. The largest source of funds comes from what we call general purpose revenues, which are in essence income and sales tax dollars. There's a significant amount of federal money that comes in. We have some major federal state programs. The Medicaid program is the largest, where the federal government pays about 60% of for healthcare purposes for certain individuals on Medicaid. The state kicks in 40%. We get program revenue money, which comes from user fees, basically. A good example is tuition comes in from students at the University of Wisconsin system. And we have segregated funds, which are set aside for specific purposes, generated usually from a specific fee, specific fee or tax, like motor fuel taxes that go in, automobile registration, et cetera, that go into the transportation fund. So those are the basic 4 sources of money. And then the state also bonds for some projects, buildings primarily, and roads. And so in total, the governor's budget recommendation is about $122 billion for the 2-year period, 25-27.
Okay. So, yeah, you did mention, you've been at this for a long time at this point. Are there any big changes that you've seen in the budget process over the years?
I think in essence, the process itself is not changed significantly. And that is the governor introduces a budget, goes to the finance committee. Finance committee meets, tries to get it passed by the beginning of the fiscal year. So the overall process, I think, has served the state well, and it continues. I think there are certain budgets that are more difficult than others, and it primarily depends on economic factors. So in the Great Recession, revenues really went down, and during the pandemic, there were changes that were made. In the early 80s, we had some really difficult budgets. So the economy dictates to a large extent what will be in the budget, what will not be in the budget. But the process itself, I think, has generally remained the same. And again, I believe it's one that's worked well for the state.
Now, as far as the idea of having a difficult budget, do you think the one that's coming up will be difficult? What are your thoughts on how that process will go?
I think one of the things that we do every year in January, every year, regardless of budget year or not, we project tax collections for the state, revenues that we think will come in for the budget period, the 2 years. Historically, governors and legislatures, regardless of party, have used those estimates and our numbers when they put the budget together, as Governor Evers has done in the past, and he did in this budget. He relied on our revenue estimates. We in the odd numbered years like this year, 2025, we look again in May after the April tax collections come in to determine if we need to modify the estimates that we made in January or not. I think There are some uncertainties about the economy federally. We look at what economic forecasters are telling us, so we're waiting to see really what those forecasts look like in early May. We'll look and see what impact people think the tariffs will have on inflation, tax collections, inflation, et cetera. So that will be something that will be critical for us to make sure that we are evaluated correctly, and I think that will be a large task that we face in the coming weeks. And that will determine in large part how the committee proceeds through May and June as they try to put together their version of the budget.
Right. So kind of just evaluating what the economic impact would be in the environment,
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, you've been leading LFB a long time. It's a nonpartisan role. How have you maintained that nonpartisanship over the years, and have there been any challenges for you in that?
When people join the Bureau, uh, they are made aware exactly what nonpartisanship means in our office. And the legislature, both parties, both houses, historically and today, expect that we maintain nonpartisanship. Our credibility depends on it. We need to be fair, unbiased, present factual information to assist the 132 legislators to help them do their job. So the nonpartisanship is something that we know we need to do. We guard very carefully our nonpartisanship role, and our credibility really it's fundamental to our credibility. And so we've just been able to maintain that role. And the other thing that I really appreciate is the leaders of the legislature, again, regardless of party, have really insisted on our being nonpartisan. They expect that, and they certainly have a right to, and we really adhere to it. There are other legislative service agencies like ours. There's the Legislative Council staff, group of attorneys who staff most committees other than the Finance Committee. Legislative Reference Bureau does bill drafting and some analytical work for the legislature. Human resource offices, the Legislative Audit Bureau. We've got Legislative Technology Services Bureau, which does most of the computer work for the legis. We are all nonpartisan. We all understand that role, and it really helps all of us to make sure that we act in a nonpartisan fashion, and I believe it has served the legislature well.
Great. Well, thank you again for joining me on the podcast, and I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you very much. I enjoyed being with you.
All right, thanks for listening to that interview with Kate and Bob. If you want to learn more about the state budget, go to wispolitics.com and head to our budget blog. In the meantime, I'm Abigail Evans.
I'm Kate Morton.
And thanks for listening to this episode of WisPolitics Capital Chats, brought to you by Spectrum.